On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use, welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. This is episode 22, created on September 28th, 2022. Hi, I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
Hello, gentlemen. Tonight I'm drinking something a little special. I'm having an AleSmith barrel-aged Speedway Stout. Very, very tasty. Good and good for you.
I am having something special as well. I am having a Nano Vineyard Zeitgeist 2020 Chardonnay. This is a homemade Chardonnay, the first wine bottled from my vineyard.
Oh, congratulations.
I am having an orange whip. Should have coordinated that one for 3 orange whips. I'll get you guys the recipe. All right. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC podcast, Green Bay Chat. The audio is also available on Spotify and Anchor by searching for Green Bay Chat. Our topics for the week, we're going to certainly review the Packer game in Tampa Bay, as well as look at some games around the league in week 3. We have our Packer player of the past and a preview of week 4 and the Patriots game and our Packer history as well. But let's start with that game in Tampa Bay. Good thing it was last week for starters, because they are getting pummeled. Unfortunately, we're thinking about everybody in Florida. We know them, and even the Buccaneers team had to move for playing. We'll talk about that later on, where their game might be headed. But let's talk about the game itself for this week. Packers come away with a win, 14-12. I really feel, though, guys, that if the final score would have been a Packers loss 14-12, we'd be having a significantly different conversation about some facets of the game. But Neil, you're always the one with the stats. Tell us about that 14-12 win.
The most important stat is 14-12. We won. We beat the Buccaneers. We beat Tom Brady. We won in Florida in September. That's all that matters in the end. Obviously, we know that we started out incredibly hot and then just hung on for dear life at the end. But I'll take it, whatever it takes in order to get a victory. We know the big level statistics as far as how we started at 5 of 5 on third downs and then missed 8 in a row. But overall, our statistics were good. Rodgers, 27-35, 255 yards, only sacked once. I think the only sacked once was the most important statistic on offense as far as the game was concerned. We didn't run the ball a ton, but on the other hand, we ran it better than Tampa Bay. Dobbs, I know Jeff wants to talk about Romeo Dobbs. It was his breakthrough game. We only had 14 first downs in the game, and so may not be great. We had 8 penalties for 65 yards, also may not be great, but we did enough that was necessary to win. And certainly we're helped by the fact that Tampa Bay was missing their top 3 receivers, but I'm not going to complain. We've been in situations like that before. It was a beautiful game as far as the fact that we won, and our defense looked really good for the first 3+ quarters. Obviously they made a game of it right at the end, but Tom Brady through 3 quarters was 18 of 26 for 147 yards, a 5.7 yard per attempt. If you're holding Tom Brady like that through 3 quarters, you're going to be in a position to win. Leonard Fournette, only 12 rushing attempts for 35 yards.
I think that was huge.
That was huge. And, it's the yards per attempt was obviously really good, but also the fact that they couldn't get anything going as far as the rushing games were concerned is a huge element. Our defense looked like the defense that we thought they were going to be, at least through most of the game. And I know John has some complaints about some elements of the game, but Devondre Campbell, 14 tackles in the game and 1 critical pass defended. Rasul Douglas, 8 tackles and 2 passes defended. Nixon for president, Keyshawn Nixon with 7 tackles. The defense, players coming out of nowhere, but also the players from last year that we hoped were going to continue did actually continue. There were a lot of really positive elements as far as the game was concerned, and that allows us to overlook the more negative elements. And then the most positive element as far as the game is concerned, beyond the first 2 drives, Pat O'Donnell punting 7 punts for 339 yards. Both teams' punters actually out punted their quarterbacks in a throwback to that 1977 Packers-Buccaneers game where both punters were 300 or more yards. Globally, though, with Pat O'Donnell, though, 5 punts inside the 15-yard line. The Packers are actually number 1 in the NFL in opponent starting field position, and that relates a lot to our special teams. I think we're getting to the point that maybe we can stop calling them the asshats. We are by that number. And
We're
I know,
getting
Jeff,
there. We're getting there.
I know you have your concern. I know you're afraid of being jinxing things, but we are getting to that point. We are winning field position battles on special teams. And in a game like that against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and a game against Tom Brady, those are the things that make a difference.
No, agreed. It was there. I'm still going to go with the asshats. I know during the game, back and forth, you would say something and you jinx the shit out of it a couple of times. They're still the asshats. I mean, they're our asshats, and they've made quite a bit of progress, as you said, Pat O'Donnell. So he's a couple historically kind of where he fits in here as well. So with those 5 punts inside the 20-yard line, he as for Packer, he tied for most in a single game since 1976, and right now he's number 2 in the league with 9 total. So the switch to Pat O'Donnell, hey, that worked out really, really well. And if NFC Special Teams Player of the Week, he's our asshat, and I think the where they kind of were the asshats, but it wasn't totally their fault, was that when they had Tampa in the end zone, basically they kicked out or they punted out. They had that penalty that was kind of a killer, because
it was a 30-yard change of field position, but it wasn't a killer in the end, and it wasn't a killer because
correct. But
on average they did what they needed to do.
That's true. But getting back also to the defense, right now the Packer defense leads the league in opponent third down percentage conversion, 22.6. And for a Packer defense, this is also historically pretty good. So that's great. And
specifically in the Tampa Bay game, Tampa Bay was 2 of 11 on third down conversions. So
yes,
we did the job that we needed to do on third down.
Well, and even more so to dissect this a little bit more, third and long, 6 or more yards. The defense is tied right now for first in the NFL. They've only given up 1 conversion out of 18 attempts. That's 5.6% if you're scoring at home. And Cincinnati, interestingly enough, also has that same conversion rate or lack thereof. So that's also good. So when obvious passing downs, they're not giving away the 4th and 29s.
I will say again that I've never been so pissed off about a win in my life.
Yeah. So tell us about that, John. Please.
You have and all of the numbers are awesome. The eye test on this game was spectacular through everything but the final Tampa drive. You have a defense that is dominating throughout the game in every aspect. They have held everything in check. You talked about last week keeping Leonard Fournette in check. They did, making sure Brady has no one to pass to.
Yep.
And then there's 3 minutes left in the game, and they have to go 89 yards, and they have to score a touchdown. And they do exactly that in 13 plays. It looked like a hot knife through cold butter. And you had, yes, I'm sure that there were ghosts in people's eyes of Kevin King getting burned in man coverage and giving up a huge touchdown. But there has to be something in between playing nuts tight on the line and loose and keeping everything in front of you and letting every play go for 13 yards. It was ridiculous how just with ease they moved down the field. And it wasn't even, it's not like Brady was a surgeon. There were no tight throws on that. Everything was wide open, yards after the catch, and they just marched down the field. And you get to the point where now they're, after the penalty, the pass interference penalty on Amos, they're at the 3-yard line, and you're hoping, okay, there's nowhere really for you to keep them be loose and keep them in front of you any longer. Let's hope that you tighten up here and something happens. And alas, it didn't. They figured it out, like Neil said, on the 2-point conversion. But I was also hearkening back then upset at the end of the first half. They did the same thing. Tampa Bay got the ball, and at the 25-yard line, they went 49 yards and fumbled the ball. A nice hit by Adrian Amos and Quay Walker to get the ball out of Perryman and get the ball back. But same thing, it was loose and kept everything in front. It was a totally different scheme, a totally different game plan from what you've played the rest of the game. And I know what you're thinking. John, it's the end of the the half, the end of the quarter, they're playing loose. It's a prevent type defense. They want to make sure that blah, 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 blah. But when Green Bay got that ball back at the end of the first half with 41 seconds left, you know that they were in a position and they weren't playing to just run the clock out. They were playing to move the ball down to try to get a scoring drive out of it. And how did Tampa play their defense? Did they play loose and keep everything in front of them? No, they shut everything down and they were right up on the line. They forced Rodgers to make one bad throw and then the other incompletion because everybody was covered. He overthrew Lazard and that was it, a 3 and out. They played tight, they played strong. And I have a hard time with this saying that Tampa made adjustments better in game than Green Bay did. And I would even hearken to say Tampa made better adjustments at halftime than Green Bay did because defensively they shut us down in that second half. Well, both offenses were shut down for that matter. It was a lot of punting. Yeah, if you're a big punter fan, then you really enjoyed the second half. That's
so
sure.
What's the saying? Prevent defense prevents you from winning.
Right. And it came true. And that's what I said. There's got to be something in between. There has to be something in between. Do you just play your normal defense? Do you continue to put that pressure on like you've been doing? There's got to be something in between because that last Tampa drive was infuriating to watch.
I mean, I think that you're right about the halftime adjustment. So that in the end, the Bucs adjusted better than we did at halftime. And that's what allowed the game to be close, despite us being clearly the better team in the first quarter of the game. And you look at it as far as Rodgers, the Buccaneers blitzed Rodgers 17 times. Rodgers was 14 of 17 for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns on those blitzes. And what did they do in the second half? Well, they did the standard thing that you should be doing against Rodgers, which is they decided not to blitz. You look at how Brady adjusted to the fact that he didn't have his top 3 wide receivers. He had a 2.17 seconds average time to release, which is the fastest in the entire NFL in week 2. They basically were going after everything as fast as they humanly can. Now, a consequence of that was that they didn't have a single passing play over 25 yards, but it also meant that the only place we were able to get pressure was from our interior. And the fact that Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark had 3 pressures each points directly to the fact that we need those interior people to do anything to get pressure on Brady when he's throwing that quickly. But I think that's exactly what you've got going on at the end, that Brady's got the ability to throw it quickly. He's got people that can get open enough quickly. Not that he has starters again, but they had the ability to adjust and give what the Packers gave them.
Well, and it was abundantly clear that if you got anywhere close to Mr. Brady, he was going down. A couple of those sacks were there wasn't a lot of contact, shall we say, with some of those sacks. One thing I forgot to mention here, and just I found this interesting, in all the Packer games that have ever been played, this is the first 14-12 victory in team history.
Not shocking, given that 12 is just a stupid score for a football game.
Yeah, I thought
all those stupid scores were replicated throughout the weekend, especially the 11-10 game.
Let's switch kind of from the defense here, Stuart Cummings. Let's go kind of to the offense. And you mentioned it before, Neil. I want to talk a little bit about Romeo Doubs. So, okay, I think we might have an emerging wide receiver here. Now, his name is not Christian Watson. And we have really yet to see him at least catch the ball. So right now, Mr. Doubs is 4th among rookie receivers with 14 catches through 3 games. And on the Packers side, that's tied for most by a rookie through 3 games since 1950. Okay. James Jones. What?
Max McGee, right? 19.
No. It's James Jones had that many catches. Where you're thinking Max McGee, he had 9 catches in a game as a rookie on December 12th, 1954. That is the Packer record for number of catches by a rookie. How about
that list that you gave, the top 4? Doubs is also the only one not a first-round draft pick. The other 3 were all drafted before Green Bay had a chance to make their selection this year as well. And I think all 3 of them were, when we did our draft preview, all 3 of them were guys that people would say, we got to get that guy in Green Bay.
Yeah. So, hoping that Christian Watson, gets through injuries or whatever and gets over whatever it is, and he will contribute. But I mean, we're looking at potentially 2, if he is good, and Dobbs ends up being great, that's a win-win.
Overall, though, on the week, 2 scoring drives, and then the third one thwarted with a fumble. But really, after that, there were no scoring drives in the rest of the game. So, as I mentioned earlier, the defense, played strong throughout the game, had a couple of 2 drives that I'm upset about. But I think that the offense, though, too, while they did, I think, put up good numbers, as we said, Tampa really did have good adjustments defensively. But I think you've got to find a way to do more than surprise a team, get your scoring drives early, and then just hope to hang on, because there should have been another scoring drive somewhere in the second half. There's got to be some other adjustments that offense can make on the fly to get things working once they realize the defense has picked up on their nuances.
Well, I mean, you just sort of go like the overall big picture numbers look really good, but the Packers still only had 14 first downs in the game. And so 14 first downs says that there's something that is not working as far as the offense is concerned.
Well, 0 for 8 streak of not getting a third down. I mean, just one by penalty or by luck or something in there. It just was not happening. And during the game, I know I was getting kind of frustrated with the offense too. And it was like, why are they not doing, more jet sweeps or just kind of changing it up? It seems like the offense got pretty vanilla then as well. Even though Rodgers wasn't pressured that greatly, there was still something that just got really vanilla and it was off. I mean, they committed, or they stayed committed to the running game, which was good, but there was nothing more creative in the passing game, and Rodgers was not throwing it downfield. That was the other thing. It almost looked like dare I say, the dink and dunk, the Bears, 5-yard out passes and things like that. Give them a chance, throw it downfield a little more, see what happens. Get that offensive or defensive pass interference. It's worth a shot, because nothing was working. And if other defenses are going to key on that, say, okay, we're just going to sit back and try and let Rodgers, pick us apart. It doesn't, he either can't, or the way the plays are being called, it's not a good offensive look for us.
Yeah. 5 for 5 to start the game on third down conversions, finishing up 6 of 15, and that 6th one not coming until the final drive. Yeah. And then they failed on the last third down conversion, having to punt. And then, as we talked about earlier, Tampa on their scoring drive. But as Neil alluded to earlier, the good news is there is only one statistic that matters, and that is the final score. And it's the number points in the W column. And Green Bay walked away with this with a 2-1 record. With that, let's talk about some of those major statistics for other teams. Neil, taking a look around the league, who got a win this week that they needed, and who didn't, who played well and who didn't.
So I think the game that to me was the most important as far as the NFC is concerned is the Cowboys against the Giants. It was not a barn burner of a game. Both teams seemed like they wanted to give it away, but the Cowboys moving to 2-1 and showing the defense that they did against a mobile quarterback like Daniel Jones is something that I think was specifically impressive. They were a team that needed the victory, and being able to figure out how to get a victory when you're not playing your best is one of those critical skills that moves you up into the upper tier as far as playoff position and being ready for the playoffs are concerned. I still think Philadelphia is the best team in the NFC East. They had by far the most impressive game as far as the teams in the NFC this week. Jalen Hurts, 22 of 35, 340 yards, a 9.7 yard per attempt average, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think that the Eagles are definitely a team that we need to be concerned with again, but I think the Cowboys are the team that did something that they needed to do. And there were long periods of that game where it didn't look like they were going to do it. And there was a question of, well,
neither team
are the Cowboys or the Giants going to shit the bed? And in the end, the Cowboys made the plays that they needed to make.
Yeah. And McCarthy keeps his job for another week.
Well, and the other game that I think you would have to touch base on as being important to what we would look at, Jeff, is the Detroit-Minnesota game over by you. Yeah. And Detroit, in classic Detroit, nobody loses a game like the Detroit Lions, and they showed it again on Sunday.
No, they managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory yet again. I read a number of articles, and the Detroit's trying to change the culture. They're trying to do, not be Detroit, right? And put together some wins on the road, and they were dominant. I mean, they looked really good. They jumped out to a big lead in Minnesota too, and it's a loud place to play that horn that we all But nonetheless,
I had to turn the game off because of the fucking horn. But
yeah, or just mute it. So the point is that it is a tough environment, US Bank Stadium. So and they came in and they just dominated, and they let the Vikings hang around, and Kirk Cousins, being Kirk Cousins, will find a way sometimes, and he did. And big victory for the Vikings, especially against a division opponent. But oh man, Detroit, they had it.
But this is not 3 weeks in a row for Detroit. Their defense has allowed a ton of points in the first 3 weeks of the season, and if they can't figure out a solution to that, they're going to. I mean, they're certainly capable of being frisky, but if they can't figure out a solution to their defense, they're not going to be doing anything this year.
Yeah, I think that's where they're at. They're kind of frisky. They're like, okay, on any given Sunday, they might score 45 points, but their defense might give up just that many. And they were, they had some injuries, but there was nothing super glaring. It's just that they kind of, it's almost like the Pack. We talked about the defense and the offense, like the adjustments were made, and then they kind of played not to lose. And guess what happened? They lost.
But I don't think their defense is good enough. I think they've shown that over the past few weeks that their defense just isn't good enough to rely on it. They've just got to rely on Jared Goff and rely on the running game. And sometimes it's going to work. Sometimes it's not going to.
Yeah. I mean, when Dalvin Cook got hurt on the fumble, I mean, it seemed like it was a big momentum change in the game, and Detroit never took advantage of that. And then all of a sudden, so you figured that, okay, they were going to probably keep more passing since they weren't going to run. And they just left receivers open, and not named Jefferson this time, but they left everybody else open. And that's what killed them on that winning touchdown pass. I mean, there wasn't anybody within 5-10 yards of the receiver. I don't know if it was a massively blown coverage or what happened, but it was just like, that can't happen at that juncture of the game when you're trying to win the game.
So for me, around the league, my major player of the week and my bed shitter of the week all came in the same game, and that's the Jaguars and the Chargers. Jacksonville Jaguars snapped an 18-game road losing streak with a 38-10 blowout of the Los Angeles Chargers. Trevor Lawrence threw for 262 yards and three touchdowns, and the 28-point win was the largest on-the-road win for the Jaguars since a 33-3 rout of Minnesota in 2001. So the Jaguars definitely playing above and beyond right now. Trevor Lawrence showing that he can throw the football, that they are certainly under Doug Peterson. He I think has now matched the number of wins of what Urban Meyer, and they're tied for 5th on the all-time list is what I think I saw in there. And that's only after 3 games, right? For Doug Peterson. So I think he's going to get his team turned around there in Jacksonville. But boy, what the hell happened to the Chargers? And the other thing that the mini controversy of that is letting Justin Herbert, who had a rib injury, stay in through the whole game. I think it's admirable that they come out and they say, well, he wanted to be there with his teammates. I get it, but take all the starters out then.
But let's look at what the Chargers did, right? They had an injured quarterback, and yet their leading rusher had 5 rushes for 22 yards. That was the leading rusher for the Chargers. Well, you have an injured quarterback. That's not how you help them along as far as the game is concerned.
Rush the ball. Well, and then it was really expensive defensively too, because Bosa went out with an injury, and he looks like he's on IR now and maybe done for the season. So that's insult to injury. So here's, the Chargers, everybody's thinking frisky, and maybe not.
So the Chargers hopefully have a chance to bounce back against Houston coming up. And then, Neil, as you talked about Philadelphia and Jacksonville could prove to be a good game because you've got these 2 young quarterbacks now, and two quarterbacks who are kind of up and coming, right? In Hurts and Lawrence, and it'll be interesting to see how that game comes out this week as well. But as far as the rest of week 3, Neil, what else do you have to look at?
So my bed shitter for the week was actually the Texans, because they lost to the Bears 23-20 in a game in which Justin Fields was 8 of 17, no touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and sacked 5 times for 24 yards. I don't understand how you can lose in the year 2022 to a team whose quarterback plays so utterly poorly. And yes, the Bears had a lot of yards rushing. They had 281 yards rushing total. But, stack the box, man. I mean, just stack the box.
Well, more
you should be able to
people.
stop running. For God's sake, you shouldn't be able to allow a quarterback to win in a situation like that. If you know the quarterback sucks, do something about it as far as what else they're going to try. I can't believe the Texans allowed the Bears to win that game.
How about those back-to-back weeks for Mr. Fields then, huh? Whoa.
It is not looking like he is going to be the Bears quarterback who rises above the history of Bears quarterbacks. I think the other game that was surprising was the Kansas City Colts game, mainly because the Colts hadn't shown anything so far this year. The statistic that was striking for me was that Patrick Mahomes was 20 of 35 for 262 yards. And I don't know, maybe it might be that having receivers matters and you can't just sort of rely on your quarterback to do everything. I'm not hoping that's the case, given that we're sort of in the same situation as Kansas City is, but not having receivers might be making a difference for Kansas City.
Yeah. Well, speaking of receivers, how about those Las Vegas Raiders? 0-3. We've all seen the meme, Davante Adams' agents, as Bradley Cooper from The Hangover calling, the car's on fire in the background. It's just a disaster, calling the Packers front office, oh, maybe this wasn't such a good idea, So, Davante's not getting catches. I don't know if I haven't done enough research if he's like historically low. I know they're kind of keying on him, obviously. And the Raiders are 0-3. So it's a tough division, obviously, but 0-3 is their toast, I think, now. And then next week is going to be difficult again. So who knows? Maybe they'll find it. Maybe their Hall of Fame quarterback in Mr. Carr will find new footing. But man, 0-3 for them is a pretty big hole to start out in.
And overall, there was no shortage of nominees for bed shitter of the week either. While Green Bay overcame the heat and played well, Buffalo seemed to struggle against the Dolphins, and they came away with their first loss of the year as well. But that's a good look around the league for week 3. We'll be talking about week 4 in a little bit. But first, we have our Packer player of the past. Hey, you're Antonio Freeman.
And indeed, Antonio Freeman is our Packers player of the past this week. It is Patriots week. Our favorite Patriots game of all time was Super Bowl 31. Antonio Freeman being a star of that Super Bowl 31 game. The photo is from us meeting Antonio Freeman at a meet and greet back in the game in Cincinnati last year, and also the source of John's quote. So Antonio Freeman, Packers player, born in Baltimore, Maryland, went to high school in Baltimore, went to college at Virginia Tech. And in Virginia Tech, he was a steady but not spectacular performer. His senior year, he had 38 catches for 5 touchdowns, 586 yards. So somebody who clearly had some skills, but somebody who was underrated probably going into the draft. And so one note of his college is that he did return 64 punts, including a touchdown return in college. Antonio Freeman was one of 4 Packers third-round picks in the 1995 draft, along with Darius Holland, William Henderson, and Brian Williams, after Craig Newsome in the first round. And obviously that 95 draft was central to us in Super Bowl 31 in the 96 season. So like many rookie receivers, he did not start out as a star his entire rookie year for the Packers. In 95, he had 8 receptions for 106 yards and 1 touchdown in week 15 in a game against the Saints. In the playoffs, he only had 4 receptions for 43 yards, but he made his mark in the playoffs as far as somebody that we should be looking forward to as far as the future, because in the Atlanta wildcard game, he had a 75-yard punt return for a touchdown that moved the Packers ahead 14-10. So we had him on our radar coming into the 1996 season. In the 96 season, after a few games, Robert Brooks went down injured. And so we had wide receiver by committee, something that sounds familiar as far as what we're doing this year. And Antonio Freeman, who had done really very minimal effort in the past. We had Don Beebe, Terry Mickens, Andre Rison eventually, Derek Mays, Desmond Howard, and then we needed our Keith Jackson as a tight end for 10 touchdowns that year. But Antonio Freeman established himself in that 1996 season, 56 receptions, 933 yards, and 9 touchdowns within that year. But it was really in the playoffs where he moved himself to a star. In the San Francisco game, he had a fumble recovery for a touchdown. In the Carolina game, he had a reception for a touchdown. In the Super Bowl, obviously he had the 81-yard touchdown that at the time was the record for the longest touchdown in Super Bowl history, something that was later surpassed somehow by Jake Delhomme and Machine Muhammad. But that play in Super Bowl 31 is possibly my favorite Packers play of all time. We are down 14-10. We'd started out strong. Our defense had gotten an interception. We'd gotten a touchdown to Andre Rison earlier, but we're in a situation where we're now behind. And what do? We just throw a pass down the sideline to Antonio Freeman. He catches it at the 50 and runs the last 50 yards. And Pat Summerall was sort of shocked by the situation of how you leave a speedster like Antonio Freeman that open. And so I think that was the turning point as far as the Super Bowl was concerned, Desmond Howard notwithstanding. Antonio Freeman was a star for us for a number of years afterwards. As Packers fans, we like to forget Super Bowl 32 because of the pain at the end of it. I'll remind you that Antonio Freeman had 2 touchdown receptions in Super Bowl 32, 9 receptions for 126 yards. So if we were to have won that game, it was Antonio Freeman that was one of the reasons why we would have won that. In the 97 season, he really had a breakout year, 81 receptions, 12 touchdowns, 98, 84 receptions, 14 touchdowns, including 6 touchdowns of greater than 57 yards in that 1998 season. 99, we had the change in coaching to Ray Rhodes. He only had 6 touchdowns that year, no touchdowns over 30 yards. Mike Sherman, 2000. There was a change as far as the philosophy was concerned, and he only had 2 touchdowns over 30 yards in that 2000 season, but he had one of the most famous touchdowns in football history. He did what? The touchdown reception in overtime against the Vikings. Again, one of the happiest memories as far as a Favre to Freeman reception is concerned, and also as a Packers fan going against the Vikings in overtime, turning the Packers season around for those Mike Sherman Packers in 2000, who only ended up 9-7. In 2001, he dropped off a little bit. He blamed Mike Sherman as far as changes in offensive philosophy. He went to Philadelphia in 2002, saw the wisdom of his ways, came back to the Packers in 2003. And fundamentally, his last game for the Packers was in 2003, in which it was the 4th and 26 game was his last game for the Packers. But overall for the Packers, 57 touchdowns, 431 receptions, 6,651 yards. Those are all regular season numbers. And then in the postseason, 47 receptions, 748 yards, 10 touchdowns receiving in the playoffs, as well as a touchdown punt return in the playoffs. So a guy who really rose his game in the times when it mattered most. He was a star in the playoffs in particular, and somebody who's obviously beloved among Packers fans. The photo, if you're on YouTube, is of a meet and greet in Cincinnati where Jeff and I both went up and talked to him. He was a fun guy to talk to.
Yeah, really nice guy.
For the brief period that we did, and just beloved by Packers fans for obvious reasons.
We were fortuitous to be in the building. We kind of heard about it. We ended up next door to Max Pizza, where we stayed there in Covington. And so we were there. We had good seats. I think we were ready to go for when Free came in. And as you said, you and Jeff went up, paid the price for the
nominal
photograph
fee.
Yeah, the nominal fee.
$10, wasn't it?
I think it was $10. Yeah, there was. Yeah, he was selling autographs and things like that. It was nice of him to stop in. And as we filtered out, we decided to walk up and down Main Strasse, and we ended up in another bar, the name of which I have already forgotten. But we're just sitting at a table there, and we're hanging out, and I'm facing the door, and Neil and Jeff are looking at me, and all of a sudden this guy comes walking through the door in a white t-shirt and big smile on his face. And I just said, "Hey, you're Antonio Freeman." He said, "Yes, I am." Hey, guys,
he just kept right on going.
He had to zip to the bathroom, but when he came back, he said hi to us and thanks and things like that. It was very friendly, but he definitely was on a mission to do other things that night. But just kind of a whole weekend of us being in the right place at the right time for different things, and Free just kind of popped in. It was like, "Oh, hey, you're hanging out still." And Neil, the one big statistic you forgot to mention is that in July of 2009, Antonio Freeman, along with Dorsey Levens, the two of them were inducted into the Green Bay Packer Hall of Fame. And the reason that we're talking about Antonio Freeman is because we've got the New England Patriots coming into town this weekend in Green Bay Sunday. It's a 3:25 kickoff. The injury report, I was looking at it here today. The New England Patriots quarterback, Mac Jones, has not been in practice.
He's day-to-day, John.
He is day-to-day, all right. And Brian Hoyer could be the quarterback for the Patriots. But another player for New England that is interesting, Lawrence Guy was drafted by the Green Bay Packers in 2011, the same draft that brought Randall Cobb into town. Cobb and Guy are the only two players that are still in the league. And Lawrence Guy is really the epitome of a late bloomer. He arrived in New England in 2017. Since then, he's appeared in 82 of 84 possible games, starting 80 of them. And he came out of the last game with a shoulder injury and has a chance of getting that streak snapped and not playing in this game. But on the Packers side, a laundry list of players with some ongoing injuries as well. But what do you guys see for the game this Saturday? What's going to work out?
So you mentioned that Mac Jones is injured. Mac Jones on the positive side was 22 of 32 for 321 yards, 10 yards per attempt last week. On the other hand, he had no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 3 sacks. So very much a rookie quarterback, even though he's in his second year. And it's not clear to me exactly how that's going to work as far as the Patriots are concerned and whether they're going to lose anything. They're going to lose development for Mac Jones. Whether they're going to lose their chance to win or reduce their chance to win is a different story. So I actually did watch the Patriots Ravens game a fair amount last week in view of what's going to happen. And the impression that I came out most significantly was that the Patriots D-backs are really, really good in coverage. They've got the ability to take out wide receivers. And so no matter who we have coming back or who we have playing, I am concerned about the ability of our passing game to move the ball based on the strength of their receivers and the fact that we don't have truly established, or perhaps more importantly, we don't have elite receivers. They have not established themselves yet as elite receivers. I think the Patriots D-backs are a major concern. On the other hand, the Ravens moved the ball, and they moved the ball on the ground especially. So Lamar Jackson had 218 yards passing, but he also had 107 yards rushing. The Ravens overall had 188 yards rushing. And it's the ability to move the ball on the ground that is where the Patriots have their weakness. And so I feel good about the fact that the Jones-Dillon tandem might have a week this week that is going to help open up the passing game, but also might just be solid on the ground in and of themselves. So I globally might be concerned about this game if it were in New England, but this game is in Green Bay, and I feel really good about that. The Packers are 23-2 at home, 23-2 at home since 2019, which is easily the best in the NFL. We're number 2 in home points scored in the league in that time period. We're number 1 in home points allowed per game in that time period. So I think that we've got advantages due to home field advantage, even with the Milwaukee crowd being present, even with John being present at the game, we still have an advantage as far as the home field advantage is concerned. And our team is looking good as far as the defense is concerned. We're the 6th rated defense by yards in the NFL this year. The only real question is in the game is concerned is the rubber factor of Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is now in his 48th consecutive year as a coach in the NFL. I know as Packers fans, we like to dismiss Belichick in the context of Lombardi, but 48 consecutive years as a coach in the NFL is incredible. Really, truly unprecedented. It is the record for most consecutive years, and he's now in his 23rd year in New England. And that's really where to me the rubber factor in the game is he certainly has the ability to scheme against Aaron Rodgers. Bill Belichick is 3-2 against the Packers during that time period, going back to 2002. And I think that is the one risk factor we have, is that Belichick is going to figure out a way in order to control Aaron Rodgers and hopefully from his perspective, hopefully not from our perspective, be able to control our ground game. So that to me is the biggest question mark as far as the game is concerned. The other thing I'd say from a Packers-Patriots history perspective, we're 5-6 against the Patriots overall in the regular season, 6-6 overall because of that glorious postseason game in the Super Bowl 31. Our last 3 games against the Patriots, We are 1-2. Mason Crosby scoring a lot of points has been the key. The one of those three games that was a victory, Mason Crosby had 14 points in a 26-21 Packers victory. So hopefully Mason Crosby will be getting on the scoreboard, although more importantly, hopefully Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon are going to have a ton of yards on the ground and do what Lamar Jackson did to the Patriots.
Also important, Tom Brady is not the quarterback of the New England Patriots for this matchup either.
So do you think with the corners playing the wide receivers tight, or as you observed last week, do you think it might be Tunyon time?
It's always Tunyon time.
Yeah, Jeff, your answer to any question is it Tunyon time?
I try. I want to see him get involved.
Jeff,
I want to see him do well. So maybe this is his week. Who knows? Maybe he's got a couple touchdowns and 125 yards in him this week. If
But sort of more globally, are our tight ends going to be able to exploit their linebackers in coverage? We have not seen that as a general feature of the Packers offense this year, but it's certainly something that is in the wheelhouse. Maybe this is the week where we're going to see that happen.
And a recurring theme on the podcast is that Jeff loves those tight ends.
All righty. So Neil, to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, we'll kind of stay with that theme. Since 2007, home records. Neil, you alluded to it, 23-2 since 2019. But so the Patriots actually are the number one home team since 2007 with an 8-11 winning percentage, 99-23. Following behind them, the Packers are number two, 94-25-2 with a 785 winning percentage. Again, this is since 2007. So basically, Aaron Rodgers at home is pretty good.
The rant that I want to get on, not necessarily about the game, the teams, the players it's about, as Neil mentioned, a Milwaukee game, the fans. This is one of the two gold package games. And I'll throw what possibly is an unpopular opinion out there, but in my opinion, it will be a glorious day in Green Bay when they eliminate the gold package games and just sell the 10 home games or whatever it ends up being with the changes in the schedule as an entire package. The stigma of the Milwaukee fan. Yeah, I'm sure that when your grandpa went to the games that he was able to drive into town and park next to the stadium and walk right in just in time for kickoff with a beverage in his hand. It's not like that anymore. And it hasn't been for a long time. And you would think that these people would realize that when they're spending 30, 40, 50 minutes in line and kickoff is happening and they're still waiting to get into the building. It's a 3:25 kickoff. If you're not in Green Bay by noon, you're late. I don't mean in the stadium. I don't mean at Lambeau Field. Just be in Green Bay. I'm not going to complain about people coming into town and spending money in our city, but you have to be in town to do that. Get into Green Bay, get your parking spot, get your burger at Kroll's, go over to Stadium View, the bar and doozies, get your beverages, check out the Bart Starr Plaza because 97.3 The Game has their setup there. They're the Milwaukee station now covering the games. Walk around, be part of the atmosphere, and then get into the stadium and be fans that are going to cheer on the game. The weather's going to be nice. Spend the day in Green Bay. We're happy to have you there.
That's quite a rant, although you somehow managed to not mention that the Milwaukee fans need to go to Lot 9 as well.
Yeah, they can go to Lot 9. They can go to Lot 2. They can walk all the way around. I got them from Kroll's to, they got to pass by us eventually.
Just show up and experience the tailgate is what you're saying.
Exactly. I mean, that's just show up, not just outside, which is great. Having people part of the game day experience, like I said, spending your money in Green Bay, I love it. But showing up, that has just been probably the biggest, I think, negative comment about the Milwaukee fans. And where it's going to get worse is the Titans game later this year is a Thursday night. My goodness, I'm shuddering to think what that game in November is going to be like. But this should be much better. It's a 3:25 kickoff. It's a Sunday. It's a nice day. Yard work be damned. Let's get to Green Bay and have a good day in Green Bay and go Pack, go.
So what are you saying? They leave their house in Mequon at 4 hours before game time and they just drive up and I
think if they leave the house by 10 o'clock at the latest, they should be fine. Yeah.
No, but I'm saying historically, this is as a tailgating denizen. This is what you've noticed between the regular season ticket package and the Milwaukee season ticket pack.
Yes, thinking that you can just drive into town and be there 30 minutes before kickoff and walk right into the stadium. It doesn't happen that way anymore. It's just not going to happen.
Well, it doesn't happen anywhere like that.
Right.
That's not a thing.
Well, in Green Bay, once upon a time, yes, you could. I mean, you
Right.
could even drive up on game day and buy your tickets in the parking lot from someone else selling them less than face value 30 minutes before kickoff. That was a thing once as well. It's just not like that. And it's time for those gold package fans to get with the times and get into town and let's go Pack go. Otherwise, around the league, interesting news. Apparently, Clay Matthews has stated that he is done with football, that he's retiring. Well, he hasn't played since 2019. Just one of those things that came out that he said, well, I guess I'm officially done. We'll see if he signs the proverbial one-day contract and retires in Green Bay. But as we get ready to wrap up tonight's show, Jeff, we're going to keep it in your corner for a bedtime story.
So we're keeping the picture up, and that is Super Bowl 31. I know we've mentioned this a few times tonight, but Super Bowl 31 was a pivotal moment, not only in Packers history, somewhat as in New England history as well. Now, New England had already been to a Super Bowl in the 80s and were thoroughly embarrassed when they met the Bears in the 85 Super Bowl. The Bears were just the one-year juggernaut. So after that, they were just as bad, if not worse. Actually, they were worse than the Packers. I mean, they were bad. New England was bad. So then Robert Kraft bought the team in 1994 for an unbelievably high price of $200 million. Everybody thought he was nuts. You know, this is an awful team. They're just the laughing stock. They're not the pride of Boston in any way, shape, or form. It's the Celtics, it's the Red Sox, it's the Bruins. It's not the Patriots. So he buys the team. They're not still very good. Then along comes Bill Belichick. Now, what's interesting about this too is that Ron Wolf, before he hired Mike Holmgren, also had his eye on Bill Parcells, and so Parcells really helped kind of re-energize and bring the franchise up. So in Super Bowl 31, so these are two teams kind of on the rise. So the Packers obviously have had good success. The Patriots have had more success, at least when it comes to Super Bowl, and as I mentioned before, home wins and things like that. But this was kind of a clash of the old school, if you will. So the Packers coming to rise. 29 years it had been since they had been in a Super Bowl. And there's just a lot of interesting things. I know we were out of college. This was Mecca for us to be in here. Obviously with Favre, things were going well, but to actually have the Packers in the Super Bowl was so fulfilling. We talked about this a little bit in our earlier podcasts with some fans from Cincinnati as well. When you've been through really, really awful teams and a drought of almost a generation, that when you get back to the Super Bowl, it's so sweet, it's so memorable, it's just so amazing. And to kind of back that up, so I was in doing some of the research, we've talked with Antonio Freeman, his huge play, and it was really close. It was played January 26, 1997 at the Louisiana Superdome. So you had the whole Favre connection with being from the South. It was a really close game. And really at the end, in the fourth quarter, the Packers, both defenses played well, but Reggie White, he just took over the game and solidified it. So in this game, there were a total of 7 Hall of Famers, 5 players, Leroy Butler, newly enshrined Leroy Butler, Favre and Reggie White. And then on the Patriots side, you had Ty Law and Curtis Martin. And then 2 coaches or general managers. Parcells is in the Hall of Fame, and then Ron Wolf. So I watched the game. I don't remember this at all. The halftime show. Gentlemen, the
halftime show was us going out and playing football in the snow. That's what the halftime show was.
That was the halftime show. So for those that were watching at home, they got to be treated to the Blues Brothers, James Brown, and ZZ Top. Kind of an eclectic mix. As Neil said, we were outside playing in the snow. So a couple of other things. So in researching this, and I know that I remember my father and just all Packer fans. It was so organic that, okay, they're back in the Super Bowl. And in Cliff Crystal's The Greatest Story in Sports, he had some statistics that I found just fascinating. So up until this point, through the first 30 Super Bowls, they sell Super Bowl programs. So if you go to the game and then later on, you could buy a program, either mail order, not at this point necessarily online, but you could buy a program. So up until this point, it was, kind of a reference or whatever. So for the Packer game, and I have mine still, there were over 950,000 programs sold for Super Bowl 31. And that may not seem like a lot. Through the first 30 Super Bowls, the highest amount or the most that were sold was less than 700,000. So it was this huge increase in Super Bowl programs. In addition to that, so the hats that the players wear in the locker room, the winning hats, so more than 650,000 replica hats that were worn by the Packers in the locker room after the game were sold. Again, that may not sound like a lot for today. That broke the previous record by more than 200,000. So the Packer fans wanted their stuff. In addition to that, take you back again. This is early 1997. Your VHS tapes, right? So before DVDs, you had your VHS tapes. So they would release, and I think they still do this on DVD, but they release the Super Bowl 31 or the Super Bowl champions like video. Mm-hmm. And so when they released the Super Bowl 31 champions VHS video, more than 65,000 people purchased this within 5 days of its release, and that made it the fastest selling sports video ever. How about that? Now, I was here in Minneapolis, so I was not able to make it back to Green Bay, or I was in Green Bay for the game, but came back here, did not see the victory parade. So that was another kind of Packer lore kind of thing. So again, the population of Green Bay proper is just over 100,000. So it was estimated that 100,000 people lined the 5-mile parade route, and there was another 60,000 people that were waiting in Lambeau. It was a cold, damp, overcast day. Everybody stuck it out and welcomed the Packers back, and it was truly something memorable. Like I said, we still have memorabilia, and it really energized the franchise. Obviously, they made it to the Super Bowl in the next year. The results weren't what we wanted.
Never watch a Super Bowl at JP's house.
Yes, it's all JP's fault. That's right. And we've never watched one there again. That being said, like I said, it was really kind of an inflection point up for both franchises. Obviously, then Bledsoe gets hurt, Brady steps in, many Super Bowls later. But so Super Bowl 31, very near and dear, obviously, to the three of us here and many of our friends and family as well. So just wanted to take you a trip down amnesia lane tonight from Super Bowl 31.
I think a key element of amnesia lane is the fact, we all watched the Super Bowl at Janine's apartment, and we have almost no photos of that entire night because we were just enjoying the moment. We were in the moment. The game was the game. At halftime, we all went out and played football. We were so hyped up about the Packers being ahead. And then after, we all went to downtown, and downtown Green Bay post game is one of the most memorable nights of my entire life.
And it snowed. It was snowing that night too, right? I mean, it was like perfect, and not heavy snow, but just there's flakes falling. Everybody, it was truly memorable. And what made it still memorable, the great game, but then also amongst friends.
Amongst friends, but just the sort of the global happiness that was in downtown Green Bay. People just being stupid and just sort of, I don't even know how to experience this victory.
Releasing
right?
the
it was
angst,
just
or
releasing the angst and realizing that we won the Super Bowl. And this was just a moment of pure happiness. That's what it was. It was just pure happiness, a pure release of all of those emotions. And there's just nothing like that experience. I mean, I'm wearing the jersey that I wore on that night. I'm wearing the Favre jersey.
Oh, well played. I didn't wear mine, but mine, it still exists, and it's seen better days.
I've been careful with it to yes, it's not deteriorated too badly. But that night, I mean, I can talk about the places I go. I can talk about the music that we played, just driving to downtown Green Bay in Dean's vehicle and listening to No Doubt and Gwen Stefani. And I can, all of the other music that we had on, just sort of so psyched that we were the team that won the Super Bowl, and when that had seemed so improbable for the entire history as far as our lives are concerned.
Your other piece of trivia, Jeff, about that halftime show, the Blues Brothers, as you know, John Belushi having died, Jake and Elwood, the original Blues Brothers, Dan Aykroyd was joined that night by Jim Belushi and John Goodman as Z and Mighty Mac. The answer to your trivia question of the names of the performing Blues Brothers: Jake, Elwood, Z, Mighty Mac.
That's going pretty deep. I think I would have just either like to have seen either James Brown or ZZ Top. A strange mix, but nonetheless. And I guess we could segue then to this year's Super Bowl, or upcoming Super Bowl, that has been released as well. So I can tell the enthusiasm here about that artist is.
Rihanna has signed up to be the premier artist, and like the last few years, she may get other people to come in and join her. But I do have bad news. I was looking to get an update on the Kansas City Tampa Bay game, and what I found out is that it looks like Coolio will not be joining Rihanna because he passed away unexpectedly at the age of 59. Grammy Award winner for his rap hit "Gangsta's Paradise." Coolio has passed.
Wow.
but Rihanna being a halftime performer, I think there's been a lot of people who've made fun of this, but I think that she's a great halftime performer. I just wish that she would do some covers of some Foreigner songs from the 70s, because I think that a Rihanna cover of Foreigner's "Urgent" would be one of the great covers of all time.
Ooh.
And her song catalog, I think, is a lot deeper than people expected. And she's also quite young. She, hit the scene at the age of 17 is when she had her first top 40 hits. So she's definitely part of a younger generation. The interesting thing about that, when you talk about, what songs are used to hype up the players and the crowd, and you're talking about Guns N' Roses and bands like that, AC/DC, Queen. Obviously, Queen's not going to play that.
Well, I was going to say, these hard Freddie Mercury, you can't really prop him up, but
right, that are used for getting the crowd ready to go, the teams ready to go, and then you'd certainly change directions as far as generational draw for that halftime show. But like I said, it'll be interesting to see who else she may choose to join her on stage when halftime rolls around.
Yeah, where you could argue that the NFL is looking globally too, right? Because their broadcast is going globally. So who's going to appeal more? The Guns N' Roses might be a little more of a niche than Rihanna.
I think the bigger issue is that they already know that the hardcore football fans are watching the game. They don't need to appeal to hardcore football fans for the halftime show.
Yeah, they don't need to be entertained. Yeah.
They're trying to draw the people who are switching over to the Puppy Bowl at halftime to make sure that they don't switch over.
Yes.
All right. Any more thoughts around the league coming into week 4? Neil, Jeff?
Go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go. It should be an interesting weekend.
And as we look to expand our social media footprint, for now, you can get information on the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat on Twitter and on Facebook at the GBC Podcast Green Bay Chat. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. It's free. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.